Yes.
So, hello everybody. This is Empowering Democracy. I'm your host, Joe Firestone, and I'm here with Dee Pierce, my good friend, from the host of Around the World with Dee and Friends.
Good to
And
be here.
thank you, Dee. It is good to have you here.
Thank you.
And we will be going over a number of topics tonight. First of all, the constitutional crisis, is getting near. Also the trap that Netanyahu has been setting for Trump. Next, many people, the U.S. is reeking of the smell of fear when it comes to how it looks at China.
Mm-hmm.
Then there are various tantrums that Trump is throwing when it comes to foreign policy. And finally, there's the topic of how Putin is dealing reality to Trump and what kind of impact that reality may be having on our president. Uh, Certainly, what's happening is Trump is hearing Putin's version, of what is real. And the question is, how much of it is he going to believe?
Exactly. How
I think
much is he
he
going
better
to
believe
absorb?
a lot of it. If he wants to cope successfully with Putin, he better believe a lot of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sharing out right now.
Okay, I'm going to share out too to start the proceedings. I'm going to share out to Facebook.
Because as we say, sharing is caring.
Caring is sharing.
Yep.
So there it is.
Okay.
Okay, so uh, okay, we're going to start off with some items on the constitutional crisis. And I'll start off with a piece from Nathan Tankus. I think it's the only piece he had today. It was yesterday's piece, actually. I don't think, he had a piece today. At least I haven't seen one as yet. If he had one, it was late, and I didn't get a chance to see it.
Okay.
But, uh, okay. So yesterday, it was day 11. That was February 10th. It's day 11 of the Trump, Elon Musk Treasury payments crisis of 2025. And he also says in his title, a very long title, that Marco Alez's resignation, return, and irrelevance. So that was his very long title for this particular blog. And he gives you links to all of the previous blogs in the series. And He tells us, after telling us a lot of background things, he says, finally, I'm known as a crypto skeptic, and I am, but doesn't mean I won't accept people giving away Bitcoin to me. Here's my address. And, he gives people away his address so they can give him Bitcoin, okay, if they so desire, as opposed to real money. That was important.
Mm-hmm.
Some readers may have been distressed, he says, to get a flurry of notes on the crises pieces in their email box, and then suddenly nothing. There's nothing disastrous about it. I'm sending out this newsletter today to make sure that people looking for some good news, at least by the standards of the day, can get some now. Our story begins right after we left off with Marco Elez, the Doge employee I relentlessly tracked through the bowels of the Bureau of the Fiscal Service, using my anonymous sources in my last 5 pieces, resigning within an hour of my last piece. His resignation was a gigantic relief for me and allowed me to unwind an enormous amount of stress I'd built up over the past week. If you listen to my interviews at either the Majority Report, also Lever News, at Bloomberg's Odd Lots, or radio KPFA last week, I think the stress I felt and the enormous burden that weighed on me is clear, even as I was professional and kept to the facts as much as possible. Subsequent serial news emerged on this subject, a point I'll return to. But I was able to keep on resting, and the news developed in such a way as to facilitate keeping away from work this weekend. I
Mm.
scrambled to raise the alarm about this issue at the beginning of last week and was successful at doing so while reinforcing my analysis with cutting edge investigative reporting. The best I could do on Thursday was update people by updating afternoon of day 7 of the Trump Musk Treasury payments crisis of 2025. Treasury Secretary Bessent's lawlessness. And sorry, readers, read and write code still seems in play with this brief message at the top. Update 4:21 p.m. Uh, uh, 4:21 p.m. Okay, and Marco Velez has resigned. Wall Street Journal claims it was over racist, quote unquote, posts. Obviously not true. Wired, Talking Points memo, and I got him. Need to rest more tomorrow. Now, of course, did not end up doing a piece on Friday, so let's unpack my e-telegram here and what I mean. At 3:53 p.m. on Thursday, February 6th, the Wall Street Journal published an article by Catherine Long entitled, quote, Doge staffer resigns over racist posts, unquote. Obviously, this announcement was met with celebration from me and others, including statements from me about having, quote, gotten, unquote, him. This caused confusion with some on social media, even credited me with Catherine Long's investigative efforts. To be absolutely clear, I did not, nor did I ever claim to have found archived racist posts from him. What I meant was something entirely different. It is very common in business and governmental circles for someone to be fired or resign after getting into trouble. It is especially common for the stated reason given to not be the actual reason. This means divining what is actually happening requires a critical and skeptical eye to such news reports. Ask yourself this question. Is it believable that the second Trump administration is pushing out employees for racist posts? Let alone almost as soon as these racist posts come to light? Recall that Long's article states, quote, after the Journal inquired about the account, White House spokesperson Caroline Leavitt stated that Elez had resigned from his role, unquote. Does this pass the, quote, smell test, unquote? As a plausible reason for you, doesn't pass the smell test for me. It is far more likely, though, can't be confirmed, the
Mhm.
fact at this stage that the increasing public pressure based on Wired, Talking Points memo, and my reporting, as well as likely increasing private pressure from former government officials and financial and corporate figures, converged with the reporter getting in touch and created a convenient cover story for Marco Les's resignation. Recall his resignation was official as of sometime Thursday afternoon, which is only 1.5 working days after the release of my Bloomberg interview, the first business outlet to truly dramatize the stakes. In governmental terms, that is a split second. Elez was also the subject of a court injunction that very morning, which was bad press, even if there were potentially dramatic loopholes in that may have even allowed Elez to continue having read and write access to source code. It's not hard to imagine that the op-ed out today by Robert Rubin, Lawrence Summers, Timothy Geithner, Jacob Lew, and Janet Yellen, quote, 5 former Treasury secretaries are democracies, unquote, reflects more varied and heterogeneous efforts last week to intervene in Secretary Bessent's reckless support of Doge's despoiling of the Treasury's payment system. I will also say that their emphasis on the constitutional question involved, something I was extremely early to, seems to betray a familiarity with my work. I also have independent reason to believe this was the case, which I cannot divulge. Yeah, probably Jamie Galbraith called him and gave him some confidential information. I'm just joking, but sometimes he's a source for what people are thinking about subjects like this. Somehow they call him, he gets to discuss things with him, and then he tells the person, who did the writing, hey, your thing was really instrumental in getting this going. I know that happens sometimes because it happened to me. Anyway, in any case, the timing is just too perfect for it to be coincidental. I will admit my immediate reaction the day of was skepticism towards the timing of Catherine Long's inquiries about those racist tweets. However, it appears that her inquiries were simply fortuitous timing for the Trump administration and perhaps slightly sped up something that was already in process. In fact, this is something actually very useful about the young programmers Elon Musk has hired at Doge. There is very little doubt that all or almost all of these employees have social media histories similar to Marco Elaz. This makes it easy to dispose of them while causing confusion about why exactly one of them is being fired, protecting the destructive work they were undertaking. Then, of course, things got stranger. Elon Musk posted a poll Saturday morning about whether Marco Elaz should be, quote, brought back, unquote. That was probably a Twitter poll. A couple of hours later, Vice President fans quote tweeted Musk saying, quote, bring him back, unquote. Musk then quote tweeted Vance's tweets at 3:13 on Friday saying, quote, he will be brought back to err as human, to forgive divine, unquote. I don't see anybody who's divine here. Anyway, the confirmation, however, came when Trump was asked about it at a press conference and said, quote, well, I don't know about the particular thing, but if the vice president said that, did you say that? Vance confirms. I'm with the vice president, unquote. There is the part of the Trump administration that makes decisions, seemingly led by Chief of Staff Susie Wiles. And then there is the part of the Trump administration that makes posts and turns those into decisions. The first part is likely who pushed Elaz to resign. The second part is what brought him back. Yeah, it was a Twitter poll. Here it was. 78% said to bring him back, and no said 22%. This was not a poll of the public then. It was just a Twitter poll, okay? And Twitter these days is extremely right-wing. So that poll doesn't prove anything. J.D. Vance says, here's my view on Twitter, he says. I obviously disagree with some of Elaz's posts, but I don't think stupid social media activity should ruin a kid's life. We shouldn't reward journalists who try to destroy people ever. So I say bring him back. If he's a bad dude or a terrible member of the team, fire him for that. That was a quote to tweet of Elon Musk's bring back at Doge staffer who made inappropriate statements via a now deleted pseudonym. Uh, so, and then there was a tweet from Elon. He will be brought back to air as human to forgive the divine. And that was a quote tweet of J.D. Vance's tweet. It was, however, unclear whether being, quote, rehired, unquote, meant back at the United States Treasury. This was crucial because the Thursday injunction only allowed Eles and Thomas Kraus, quote, read-only access, barring any other, quote, special government employees,
Mhm.
unquote, okay, or outside actors from access to these systems. Further, according to my sources, Kraus was not involved in a direct assessment of these systems. So with Marco out, it seems that Doge would be locked out, under, of course, the crucial assumption they respect the court injunction. The Treasury dodged questions about whether ELAS would be rejoining them. These questions became moot early Saturday morning, but we'll return to that in a moment. Crucial question is this. When ELAS left, how was his activities in the Bureau of the Fiscal Service being treated? And Nathan says, I can't speak to the state of play as of today. However, I can confirm Wired's Friday afternoon article entitled, quote, the U.S. Treasury threat intelligence analysis designates Doge staffer as, quote, inside threat, unquote. In fact, I posted on Blue Sky, since I wanted to keep on resting, the confirmation from one of my sources. Uh, the BFS is treating Marco's resignation as a cybersecurity breach. The cyber teams are working overtime to analyze the forensic artifacts Marco left behind and determine what he saw slash did. It's absolutely extraordinary that an employee given top level access is ordered by the White House was being treated this way. As of this writing, it's unclear how long this lasted or whether treating this as a cybersecurity breach was continued informally, even as White House and Treasury Secretary Bessent's pressure intensified. I would like to put off writing about this more until tomorrow for a number of reasons, not least of which we may gain more clarity by the time I sit down to write it then. What are my sources saying now? I will be unpacking a lot of the, quote, state of play with my former Bureau of the Fiscal Service employee resources, but my current BFS sources have gone dark. It should be obvious that what they did was risky to their careers and even lives. They had far more on the line than I did, and they will never get a fraction of the praise that they deserve. Nor will they get the career benefits I have from being involved in last week's enormous effort. I have no way to get back in touch with them on my own, and the only messages I received from them saved in any form are the ones I got full approval to quote on the record. I do not know my sources' names. I corroborated that they worked at BFS in alternative, undisclosed ways and cannot facilitate their identification even if I wanted to. They will get back in touch if it's safe to do so, but if they never do, thank you. I did my
Hmm.
best to thank them as much as possible while we talked, but nothing can substitute for the flow of gratitude I've gotten. Which brings me to the final topic I have to tackle today. The latest court injunction: 19 state attorney generals collectively sued the Trump administration and the Treasury over the Treasury's treatment of safe and secure data on Sunday night in a lawsuit now known as, quote, New York et al. Versus Trump et al.
Mhm.
Unquote. I'm proud to say that this lawsuit cites Notes on the Crises, which of course is the blog we're reading from now. Not only does the lawsuit cite this newsletter, it cites it in an important way. The Treasury has represented that Doge associates have, quote, read only, unquote, access, i.e., the ability to view content, but not the ability to modify it. But the true limitations on Doge's access remain unclear, and Doge may still be able to modify the systems in consequential ways, emphasis added. The footnote that follows Consequential Ways cites, quote, day 7 of the Trump Treasury Payments Crisis 2025. Euros and Wired's reporting is actually doing something, unquote. Given the importance of this issue, I'm especially happy that my writing got cited on such a crucial point. Uh, and then he displays a piece of the court injunction, or the actually temporary restraining order, that actually cites him. So there's that. At 1 a.m. Saturday, February 8th, Judge Engelmayer issued an injunction based on the state AG's lawsuits. The court's firm assessment is that, for the reasons stated by the states, they will face irreparable harm in the absence of injunctive relief. See Winter versus NatRes Def Council, Incorporated 555, US 720, 2008. That is both because of the risk that the new policy presents of the disclosure of sensitive and confidential information, and the heightened risk that the systems in question will be more vulnerable than before to hacking. The injunction further orders, item I, restrained from granting access to any Treasury Department payment record, payment systems, or any other data systems maintained by the Treasury Department containing personally identifiable information and or confidential financial information of payees, other than to civil servants with a need for access to perform their job duties from the Bureau of Fiscal Services, who have passed all background checks and security clearances and taken all information security training, Code 4 and federal statutes, and Treasury Department regulations. II, restrained from granting access to all political appointees, especially government employees, and government employees detailed from an agency outside the Treasury Department, to any Treasury Department payment record, payment systems, or any other data systems maintained by the Treasury Department containing personally identifiable information and or confidential information of payees, and III, ordered to direct any person prohibited above from having access to such information records and systems, but who has had access to such information records and systems since January 20th, 2025, to immediately destroy any and all copies of material downloaded from the Treasury Department's records and systems, if any. Thus, this injunction is far more comprehensive than Thursday's injunction. It does not have the, quote, wiggle room, unquote, that injunction has, and the Attorney General offices involved seem to have been focused on the difficulty of trying to enforce, quote, middle ground, unquote, injunctions like read-only access, unquote. I'm biased, of course, but clearly my newsletter contributed something to their efforts, since they cited it on this very point. I'm sure I'll be writing a lot more about this injunction in the future and the question of its enforcement. If you have factual information regarding whether this injunction is being violated, please get in contact over Signal. And the information of how to get in contact over Signal is above in the blog. Part of why this piece took me so long to write today was that there was just so much to cover. In fact, too much. Tomorrow I'll write about Secretary Bessent's very strange Bloomberg interview last Thursday, the Treasury's response to the early Saturday court injunction, Musk's tweeted plans for the Bureau of the Fiscal Service, the Booz Allen contractor Treasury fired over his analysis of the Marco-created cybersecurity risks and the so-called, quote, black budget, unquote, which is apparently processed by the Bureau of the Fiscal Service. Have a good night, readers. Well, that was a terrific piece.
Yes, yes, yes. It
Yeah.
just seems like we're part of a soap opera.
Yes. It was certainly a soap opera for him because he was thoroughly and completely involved. But he's completely right about the importance of those not having access to the personal and private information people. And he's completely right about the importance of their getting locked out and the
Exactly.
importance of, this injunction. Okay. Uh, we don't know whether the administration plans to violate this particular injunction, but since there haven't been any more blogs since this one, uh, it seems clear that uh, 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 what Nathan is doing is trying to ferret out as much information he can from the Bureau of the Fiscal Service in order to see whether the federal government is complying with this particular court injunction. Now we move to an article from the American Prospect that also talks about the issue of violating injunctions. Okay, court injunctions. I think that's a very important issue. Uh, the Earl of Lurie is here. Hi, Earl. He is the only visible person here, though uh, there are some 14 people here. Okay, anyway, I'm going to put up the American Prospect article for you, D.
Okay.
And I would appreciate if you would read that one, and I will introduce comments where they seem relevant, and you can do the same.
Okay.
I'll get to the top here. Can you see it? No, I haven't
No.
shared it yet. All I've done is get to the top of it here. How about that? How about that?
Yes, I can see it.
Okay.
Will Trump continue to defy court orders? As long as nobody will stop him, why wouldn't he?
And this is from Dave Dayan, February 11th, 2025.
Not above the law. Okay. Anti-Trump protesters hold signs outside Manhattan Criminal Courthouse in New York last year. The biggest question in America right now is whether Donald Trump and Elon Musk will abide by restrictions on their power from the co-equal branches of government. Thus far, Congress has pleaded nol contendere as presidential challenge to its authority, standing by idly as agencies authorized by Congress that could only be unauthorized by Congress are simply deleted as spending appropriated by Congress is rescinded. Even half-decent ideas like no longer losing money by making pennies are being commanded by the president. I didn't know that in Canada they've been doing that. They haven't been making the pennies. Even as Article 1 of the Constitution literally gives Congress the exclusive authority, quote, to control the money.
To coin money.
Yeah, to coin money.
Right.
The primary refuge at the moment for those who want to stop the slide into authoritarian rule by diktat is the courts. Given the rightward tilt of the ultimate arbiter of such disputes, the Supreme Court, that is not encouraging. No, it's not. I was thinking about that today. Early outcomes in emergency cases have fared well. The courts have at least temporarily blocked the Office of Management and Budget's unilateral freeze on federal grants and loans. The fake, quote, buyout offer for federal workers, the mass administrative leave for employees of the U.S. Agency for International Development, the Musk team's access to the Treasury Department payment system, the proposed end of birthright citizenship, and more. By Monday afternoon, the unilateral cut to overhead on National Institute of Health grants was blocked, but we've yet to see the conservatives on the court weigh in. Oh, Lisa's here too.
Oh, great. I'm so glad she arrived.
Yes.
Hello, Lisa.
Look, a much more important question is playing out in real time. Will the Trump administration simply refuse to follow adverse court orders, simply ignoring the courts and Congress on the way to dictatorial governing? That's what should keep every patriotic American up at night. And the early indications should only raise the alarm or that alarm. The continued holdup of congressionally appropriated funds as a result of the OMB freeze, which was rescinded and blocked by the courts way back on January 29th, is just one example. On Monday, Judge John McConnell issued an order in case brought up 22 states and Washington, D.C., that his temporary restraining order blocking the payment freeze is being abused. Quote, the plain language of the TRO entered in this case prohibits all categorical pauses or freezes in obligations or disbursements based on the OMB directive or based on the President's 2025 executive orders. McConnell wrote, meaning that even the illegal executive spending decisions outside of the OMB order should be halted. We know that spending blockages continue to happen. Head Start providers aren't getting their promised funds, neither are community health centers. Some of what have had to close because even a small delay in funds is catastrophic. Environmental funds related to Trump's alleged, quote, termination of the Green New Deal have been frozen. Some funding was restored, but not all. The electric vehicle charger program has been suspended, also at odds with a judicial order. The broad freeze on foreign aid has had the residual effect of freezing funds that farmers expected. Because the international food aid programs are stuck, government agricultural programs have separately not been paying out. Another 900 million in contracts that shed light on the state of American schools was canceled illegally just yesterday. The Justice Department has tried to argue that some spending pauses were based on other Trump executive orders and not the OMB memo. But McConnell, whose federal court order blocking the payment freeze isn't even the only one, rejected that. He said that the continued blockages or blockage, regardless of all the alleged authority for it, is, quote, likely unconstitutional and has caused and continues to cause irreparable harm to a vast portion of this country. But Monday's order is merely a reiteration of what McConnell has already said. Immediately restore funding and clear any hurdles to doing so. Well, what if they don't? The White House clearly wants to arrogate all spending decisions to itself and illegally impound spending it doesn't like. And it has yet to allow court orders to get in the way. He's just basically feeding his base with that, acting like Mr. I'm on my own and I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah, he is, of course, feeding his base with it, but uh, we're getting very close to the constitutional crisis now
Okay.
because he cannot ignore the court orders. Okay? The court is proceeding rather deliberately. It puts forward, okay, an order. It notes in another court order that the first court order is getting abused. I don't know if the next step is criminal contempt of court, but okay, one obvious point here is that okay, Trump is probably immune to criminal contempt of court. Okay, because the Supreme Court he says that whatever he's done in his official way He can't be charged with anything. Uh, uh, but Elon Musk, uh, okay, is not going to be uh, totally immune. The people who work for Elon Musk are not going to be totally immune. Secretary of State, is not going to, to be immune of criminal contempt of court. Criminal contempt of charges can be laid on all these people. And then Trump, would have to pardon all these people. And then the courts would have to do something. In other words, they would have to do something because, uh, the whole justice system, would be at stake in this kind of situation. And I think the Supreme Court then would have to come and have to take the case and would have to decide. And based on the court's previous strong emphasis, okay, on the separation of powers, in the administrative state case some time ago, taking the position that Congress isn't even able to delegate its powers to the executive branch. When it wants to delegate some of its powers to the executive branch, it can hardly decide at this point, okay, that even though the Congress can't even delegate, its prerogatives to the executive branch, that it's possible for the president to seize its powers. In other words, this would be
Mhm.
completely self-contradictory. I don't think the court is going to decide that. Of course, I think that Roberts and I shouldn't say Roberts, but um, uh, um, um, uh, uh, Justices Thomas, and Alito are totally lawless. But I think uh, Amy Coney Barrett, okay, and Roberts would have a tough time staying on the same side, okay, as Alito on Thomas in this one. So I think there's certainly going to be a majority of the court in favor of upholding the separation of powers, especially since the separation of powers is so important to the justices as well. So anyway,
Okay. Similarly, the court order temporarily reinstating and restoring systems access for thousands of U.S. aid employees who were laid off has not been complied with, according to a filing on Monday from the plaintiffs in the case. The plaintiffs identified multiple employees who have not been given access yet. Though others have been able to get in, many were told that they could not get access back until, quote, political leadership signed off. An astonishing thing to say about compliance with a judicial ruling.
okay, it is an astonishing thing to say because it makes the people, uh, okay, who are saying to the employees, well, you can't get back in until political leadership signs off, it makes them vulnerable to criminal contempt charges.
Hmm.
In other words, all the way down the line, there can be so
Yeah,
many people uh, 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 charged with criminal contempt that, I mean, I
right.
don't
And,
think people
and the
realize.
people, right. And people are just doing their job, even though it's, like you said, illegal for them to be doing that, but they're just following what the person above them is telling them to do.
But in this case, they can't because all the people involved in this whole process all have responsibility to comply with a court order.
Hmm.
It doesn't matter what their supervisors have to say. They're all responsible for complying with the court order. If they have any role in it at all, they cannot go against the court order and escape uh, possible consequences. Okay, but anyway, since you can see how broad this crisis is, you can see why it's a constitutional crisis. So many
Yes.
people are involved, on all sides, that it's just creating a total mess. It's not surprising that Trump, would create this kind of mess. Anyway, that's because he never thinks things through. He just, Anyway, going farther.
Contracts with USAID are being terminated in Marseille, despite exemptions that are supposed to be in place for humanitarian assistance.
Yeah,
A
the
U.S.
administration said there was going to be humanitarian assistance was going to be exempt from the OMB order, but that's not how it's working out. What they say can't be counted on. You only
No,
have to look at what they do.
exactly. A USAID Inspector General's report highlights the extent of the wreckage with 489 million in food assistance. It's 489 million in food assistance left
And
rotting at ports and warehouses.
yes, $489 million left writing. That's a lot of food
Yes, it is.
writing at ports and warehouses.
On the Treasury payment system front, the news is slightly better. According to a declaration from Tom Kraus, the Deutsche liaison at Treasury, the department is complying with the order to terminate access to the payment system for people outside the department, including political appointees and, quote, special government employees, and to destroy all records outside of Treasury's control. Krauss states he is the only person who had access at the time the order was issued, and he is not a coder. He calls his access, quote, over the shoulder.
Okay, which means I think that uh, he can watch over the shoulder of a coder
Okay,
and see what's on the screen.
right. Marco Elez, the young coder who also had access, resigned after information got out about racist posts he made. According to this Sunday declaration, he has not been retained, contrary to Musk's claim.
Oh, so Musk was lying about that. All that stuff on Twitter was a lie.
Yeah. Krauss lobbied for access for contractors that service the payment system, saying they were necessary to its functioning. He also wants some political appointees, including Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, to be able to, quote, attend briefings concerning information obtained from the data. But Trump's lawyers have been far more belligerent than just calling the court order overbroad, arguing that no judge can prevent a president from directing his executive branch and appointing his employees.
Yeah, but a president has to comply with the law,
Exactly.
okay, particularly the classification laws.
Hmm.
I mean, he cannot give access uh, 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 but to some employee uh, uh, to, uh, uh, to data systems that the employee has not been cleared for previously.
Right. Vice President J.D. Vance was more explicit. Quote, judges aren't allowed to control the executive's legitimate power.
That's true. But the question is, what is the legitimate power of the executive?
Exactly. It would be news to Joe Biden that courts cannot constrain the executive branch. But the hypocrisy angle is really the least of our worries at this point. What happens if court orders are not met with compliance? The higher courts have a bad track record at punishing open disobedience of their rulings. As Yale law professor Nicholas Perillo wrote for the Harvard Law Review in 2018, higher courts have not used sanctions like imprisonment for contempt or large fines. Even if they have not foreclosed them, the quote shaming effect of sanctions without consequences have been enough for compliance in most years. Perlow finds, quote, no example of open presidential defiance of court orders in the years since 1865, but the literature needs an update. Perillo is correct to say that such open defiance would spur a constitutional crisis. Indeed, that's where many believe we are today. But a crisis requires actual confrontation. There are certainly some people willing to fight. See the missive from the American Bar Association. And then, but Congress has decided not to play the game, and the courts are not necessarily reliable in that regard. Either the Trump administration is using the usual intimidation tactics to get their way, or they are prepared to bulldoze the judicial branch, placing the rubble alongside the legislative branch that has so far self-destructed. The answer will reveal the remaining hope for democracy. Importantly, the public also has a role to play. Whether Trump has the consent of the governed will determine the boundaries of his aggression. The fire lit under the public has thus been small, but as people see the tangible consequences, it will burn and burn. Will we be roused to action in that ultimate moment when Trump is told what he cannot do and he ignores it?
That is the question, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and it seems that the Republicans, they definitely are going to be losing in the next elections. The congressional elections with all this.
Yes.
I would think so.
Okay. As someone said to me today, if there are congressional elections in 2026, I personally believe there will be such elections in 2026 that the Republicans will lose. But before that time, uh, we have a situation where Trump can do extreme amounts of damage. He's obviously already doing extreme amounts of damage through Doge, okay, and Elon Musk. Okay, and so the question is, what can make him stop? Now, certainly, the Republicans are not yet ready to impeach him. Not yet ready to impeach him. However, there are special elections coming up now very soon to replace the three House people who were called upon by Trump and who have left the House. And so, if the Democrats should win those races, control of the House is going to change hands.
Okay.
Okay, it's going to go over to the Democrats. Then the Democrats will be possible, it'll be possible for them alone to impeach Trump. But then the question is, can he be convicted in the Senate? Uh, okay, the Republicans uh, have a small margin, okay, in the Senate. It's a swing of 3 votes, but of course it requires 2/3 of the Senate to convict the president. So the question is, will they ever be able to get the 2/3? As we're sitting here, it doesn't look like they'll be able to get the 2/3, but we have the following situation. This damage that Trump is doing, okay, is very severe. It's in it's in the damage of many billions of dollars, which will now not be coming out of the federal government, okay, and going into uh, um, uh, the economy of the United States or the world economy, and that's going to have an effect on both of these particular systems. And if Trump continues that, okay, and if there are no other things that are done to keep the flow of money going, then the economy will soon be close to collapse, and more of the corporations will be feeling the pressure. The stock market, okay, is going to be feeling the pressure. All kinds of people are, going to be up in arms. there will be all kinds of demonstrations, okay, and protests. Uh, all kinds of institutions have currently been offended by the president. Certainly, the FBI has been offended. Uh, 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 Certainly, uh, the firing of the inspector generals is important. The destruction of AID is important. All these things are important uh, from the standpoint of people getting fired up. So the question is, what will the impact on the Senate be over the next 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 2 months, maybe 3 months, maybe 4 months? As we move into the summer months, as it becomes necessary to pass a budget. There has to be a vote on the budget on the 14th of March. Uh, uh, Democrats say they're going to freeze things, uh, uh, because of the debt ceiling. So there are going to be continual fights. The question is, one, are the Democrats going to be taking over the House in the special elections, which are going to occur? And secondly, if they switch control of the House, then is Trump going to be quickly impeached? For opposing these court orders and for doing all this other stuff and uh, essentially grabbing the functions of the legislature, away from the legislature. Uh, okay, he's so far been concerned only with stopping spending, but what will he do to start spending again? He has to get the Congress to start to spend again. Okay, in other words, he's busy taking away the functions of Congress, and yet he's going to want Congress to make appropriations. Will they make appropriations under those particular circumstances? Uh, so anyway, these conflicts, I think, are going to have great effect, on the economy. I think some senators are going to switch over. For the Democrats to get the 67 senators they will need, they obviously have to swing uh, um, uh, 20 votes away from the Republicans. So, will 20 of the 53 Republicans actually switch? I don't think the Republicans in the Senate are as MAGA as the House members are. In other words, the senators tend to be more above the fray. And while they're going to worry about primaries and things like that, and they're going to worry about the power of the billionaires to primary them, if they think their seats, okay, are at issue, they may simply say, "Oh, to hell with it," and switch sides, get rid of Trump. Also, I haven't even begun to talk about the impact his foreign policy moves could have. On the one hand, they could strengthen him, if he makes a deal with the Russians. Okay, but on the other hand, what's going on in the Middle East looks very, very bad for the administration because the way Trump is going, he may get us into a wider war, okay, in the Middle East. And this wider war could involve, uh, not simply Iran and the axis, of resistance, but also Turkey could come in on the side of the Palestinians. Egypt could come in, on the side of the Palestinians. He could be facing, a united Islamic front if he tries to do what he says he's going to do. And I think the consequences are going to be grievous, for the United States. And I think they're going to hurt uh, his position with respect to impeachment also,
Mhm.
because he's creating a fiasco in foreign policy also. So it remains
Mhm.
to be seen what can happen. But anyway, those two first two articles, uh, and that pretty much covers the first of our topics, which is a constitutional crisis, is nearing. So let's move on to our second topic, which is Netanyahu's trap. Uh, and that is expressed, okay, in a video from the judge, okay, in Alastair Crook. Okay, so I'm going to present, okay, and play the video, and we should stop it whenever we have a thought, okay, or comments. Hi, Sherry. Very nice to see you. Hi, Evelina. Very nice to see you. Sherry Wise is here. Okay, there's Alastair.
The fastest growing scam of 2025 is spreading like wildfire and wiping out bank accounts in seconds.
My dear friend, Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu just spent a week in Washington, D.C., meeting with the President of the United States without the American Secretary of State, meeting with congressional leaders as well, and spending time in a secured area of the Pentagon without any security check on him or the personnel with him. Do you think he had something up his sleeve? And do you think Donald Trump had something up his sleeve, so to speak, when they finally met and had their joint press conference?
Well, I think what was actually up Netanyahu's sleeve was a great deal of fear and trepidation, because he was in a deep bind. He came to Washington believing that Trump and Witkoff, Trump's envoy, was going to put maximum pressure on him to go to phase 2 of the hostage release from Gaza. And he had this impossible dilemma. The agreement, the first phase of which is already expired on the 16th, is now in the second phase, although it hasn't begun. And he does not want that to go ahead. He doesn't want a second phase of hostages to be released. And he has also, first of all, signed up to the second stage and third stage. It is part of the agreement of which America is a guarantor, along with Qatar and Egypt. And at the same time, he gave a secret undertaking, which is held in the vaults in Tel Aviv, that he would go back to war against Hamas and not do the second phase. And so he didn't know how this was going to turn out, and he was going to try and divert Trump towards Iran or some other basis. And then Trump surprised him by coming out not with just a sort of comment that he'd made earlier about maybe some Palestinians could go to Jordan or Egypt. He came out and say, I'm going to take the whole of Gaza and I'm going to turn it into the Riviera. So,
Okay, so what I wanted to comment on here was, in saying that, Trump was breaking the agreement that he himself was the guarantor of. When he said that he was going to, that we, the United States, were going to take over Gaza, that was certainly not anywhere in the ceasefire agreement that was made. And when he followed up just a day or two ago, okay, with the statement that Hamas had to free all the hostages by this coming Saturday, okay, at noon. That is nowhere in the ceasefire agreement that Trump was supposedly the guarantor of.
I know, right?
So he's breaking his own ceasefire agreement. Ridiculous.
It is
Just
ridiculous. It is ridiculous. I mean,
ridiculous.
Hamas has good reason because Israel's not complying with their end.
Israel is not complying with their end. So Hamas has good reason for what it is doing. It's perfectly within its rights. But Trump was acting the tyrant here. And we
Exactly.
see in Trump's various activities this time around in his presidency that he feels empowered to act as a tyrant. And it's one thing to act as a tyrant here at home when he's the president of the United States, but he can hardly act as a tyrant in international affairs because, of course, the power of the United States in 2025 is not what it was at the beginning of the 1990s.
No, and he's going to end up, or is it his intention for a war? Is that what he's leading to?
Yes, but we don't have the capacity to win that war, as various things we've been covering in this program have shown. The Wabin article we covered, I think, on Saturday, or did we cover it last Thursday? I can't, actually remember, but that was a stunning display of Chinese weapons that they have to fight with. Okay, today there's a follow on to that article because he got a lot of negative comments on that article. So, I'm very anxious to get to his answer on that. Okay, but the point is that Trump is not getting to the reality of the power situation in international politics.
Right, because they're not telling him. He's got people around him that are misinformed. Wherever they're getting information from, it's incorrect. They're all thinking Iran is weak.
Yeah, it's not only Iran, they are also misjudging the strength of Russia, the strength of China, the strength of the alliances that they are now facing.
Hmm.
And not just the military strength, but the economic strength of those alliances too. As we're seeing, because there are all kinds of international events now shifting the economic balance away from the United States over to BRICS. So, the geopolitics of this, or the geodynamics we're seeing, just incredible. Anyway, going on with Alastair now.
So, I mean, that did surprise Netanyahu, and it took some time for him to regain his composure. But part of this, I think we have to look at what's going on and understand it more clearly. Trump is a showman. We all know that, a big showman. And what he does is he uses these sort of big ideas, these big sort of shiny ideas, and then not not necessarily connected to reality, but they're intended, if you like, to shock people, surprise people, and in a sense, to try and break up congealed, stultified geopolitical paradigms, to find some space to make people think things through in a different way. And so when he said this about Gaza, of course, it's never going to happen, that it's going to be the ethnically cleansed and rebuilt. It's not going to happen. What was the point of it? The point of it, well, there's a history to the point of it. And the history is this, that in, I think it was 2018.
Is this the end of learning languages? Meet in Nens.
It looks like the buffering is bad tonight. But it will return.
Israel was on the verge of annexing large swathes of the West Bank. And there was a great outrage about this in the West and in the Arab world, this annexation. And what happened was that Trump did a deal with the UAE. He said, okay, no annexation, and in return, you will then normalize with Israel, which they did. And they normalized. And I think what you're seeing here is what Trump intends is to do something similar with Saudi Arabia at the right moment. He will say, look, I gather the Arab world is aghast at what is being proposed, that there will be no more Palestinians in Gaza. Well, Mohammed bin Salman, you know, I think I could probably end that, or we could put it aside and forget it. But will you normalize with Israel without insisting on a full Palestinian state? And if you do that, then we can, I don't think it'll happen, what's going on in Gaza. And this is part of his big plan about Iran, Saudi Arabia, the Abraham Accords being, if you like, a new Middle East. And I think you know, this idea of his trademark way of doing politics, of surprising people, of saying something outrageous in order to sort of loosen up politics, to shift them and move them and try and find an opening. Look, I mean, there's some validity to it, but it also has its downsides. I mean, I think, you know, it's possible he'll do this eventually. And of course, Saudi can't refuse him if he does it with the pressure from Gaza. And also, it's going to loosen up the Arab states if there is a phase 3 of the hostage deal. Phase 3 is the reconstruction of Gaza. And I think, you know, he'll say, listen, do you want me to send all these Palestinians abroad, or are you going to reconstruct Gaza in accordance with, in association with the United States? That's how it's got to be. You've got to do this. Otherwise, I might go back to my plan to create the Riviera and remove all the Palestinians from the area.
Do you think?
Okay, so this is the bullying approach of Trump.
Mhm.
I'm going to do something outrageous.
Yeah, it's
If you want
crazy.
to stop me from doing something outrageous, then you have to do what I wanted you to do in the first place, which is to normalize with Israel. And normalize with Israel without having a Palestinian state. And he somehow thinks this bullying approach is going to work. Okay. Of course, it might have worked in 1990
Mhm.
when the United States was so strong. But in 2025, with hypersonic missiles around, which we have no way of countering, with the Houthis having hypersonic missiles, Hezbollah having lots and lots and lots of missiles, the Iranians with hypersonic missiles, the Russians with hypersonic missiles if they choose to intervene, the Chinese with hypersonic missiles if they choose to intervene, and with our aircraft carriers having no defense against those things. Where is the power for us to win a military engagement in the Middle East? It doesn't exist, in my view.
Can I just quickly say, it achieved two major things.
Please.
It saved Netanyahu's government from collapse and perhaps turmoil in Israel. Because the Israelis, in the wake of these releases of hostages, are really angry that the hostages have been so long, 491 days or something, 491 days, and they came out looking gaunt and unfed. And they immediately, the Israelis said, it's like they've come from Belsen. What are I mean, you can't wait. Netanyahu, you've got to do the deal now before these people die. They're in bad condition. We need the hostages done. Miriam Adelson has been flown directly to Washington in her private jet and told Netanyahu, do the deal, get it done quickly, now. And so there's a lot of pressure, if you like, in that praise. But equally, what it has done in a sense is Trump has also normalized the idea of ethnic cleansing by saying, I'm going to do it. And it's somehow actually normalized it. So the right wing in Israel are going down that path and making all sorts of plans, even if we return to war, they say, in Gaza. Ultimately, we have plans for how to get rid of the Palestinians. We're examining it. We've even found a possible place that they can go. Voluntary expulsion from Gaza. So Netanyahu is literally.
This $39 TV antenna is taking the world by storm.
Teetering on the edge. Netanyahu has him totally under his thumb because he's going to insist on the second phase, which may mean that he loses his government. he's going to insist also on a ceasefire in Lebanon. Everything hangs on Trump and Witkoff, and Netanyahu is not well. He's very much weakened. He's under pressure. His poll ratings are failing because it's clear to everyone he's not going to do a phase two. It's clear to Hamas, so there may not be a phase two, that Israel does not want to go and release the remaining. I think there are something like 87 hostages, not all of whom are alive. He's not going to go there.
The ceasefire.
Okay, so what I see now is that Trump, in recent days, suddenly coming out with the idea that Hamas has to release all the hostages by Saturday, okay, at noon. That's probably the influence, okay, of Adelson, as well as the influence, okay, of Netanyahu. They both want to clear the way so they can go back to the war. They don't want any more of this particular ceasefire deal. I think Trump has been pushed by Adelson into actually breaking this ceasefire deal himself. Okay, and that his statements concerning Gaza may have originally been intended to shake things up, okay, and get people to negotiate. But now, when we couple those statements with his further statement that all the prisoners have to be released by Hamas by Saturday, or else we see that the ceasefire deal is now over. Maybe someone can put it back together in the next 2-3 days. Okay, I don't know. Okay, but the Egyptians are moving their military into positions at this point. Also, the Iranians have been letting loose some leaks now forever that they are getting ready to fight. Okay, the Turks acted in a very unfriendly way to the threats by Trump. His peacemaking in the Middle East isn't going well.
Which the second phase of which he does not in which he does not want to participate. Is this a written document signed by him?
Yes.
I mean, stated differently, have we seen the document, and might he be humiliated if he doesn't participate, or will he come up with an excuse? So Hamas did this, Hamas did that, therefore we don't have to comply.
Exactly. Yes. It's a written document that is guaranteed by the United States. It was the one Witkoff took to, if you like, to Netanyahu on a holiday, and they said, sign this and do it and get on with it. And this is the agreement. However, there is another codicil to this agreement, which is not public, which is in Hebrew and sitting in a vault in either Jerusalem or Tel Aviv, which says the opposite, that after phase one, Israel will return to full war as demanded by Ben Gvir and Smotrich.
Well,
and
surely
the
this
right.
is not signed by both sides and by the U.S., is it?
No, it's a secret codicil. This is a secret understanding between Netanyahu. I mean, look, he's well known for doing this sort of thing, saying one thing to one people and saying another to another. But he's chosen to say one thing to President Trump and another thing to the extreme right in Israel. And it's very dangerous for him. It's existentially dangerous for him because he might lose his government, and then the court cases against him will proceed.
Do you think that Mrs. Adelson and the donor class in America, as well as the extreme Zionists in Israel, understand that Trump's proposal about the U.S. Owning Gaza is farcical and will never come to pass? Or do you think that they'll be crushed when suddenly the proposal disappears?
I think it's in his interest to make it reasonably realistic, because this is intended to put pressure on Saudi Arabia principally, but also pressure on the other Arab states to say, look, you have to do something. You're going to have to, in the third stage, or whichever stage, you're going to have to reconstruct Gaza, and you're going to have to find a way to make sure that Hamas is not running Gaza. That's his promise to the right, that that if it's reconstructed, there will be no Hamas. They will be gone one way or the other. And of course, as you've seen probably from the videos, that's a long way off, because Hamas is very visibly there, and their military are visibly there.
Yes.
But it has been a moment, it's just been, this is a turning point in Israel, I think, because the sight of these last 3 hostages, which were not like the young ladies that were released, they do look emaciated and as if they haven't eaten. Indeed, they haven't eaten. And it's partly because of last June, when the Israelis did a rescue operation and freed 4 hostages by military force. Then Hamas removed these people from, instead of being in houses above ground, removed them deep into the tunnels. And it was a time when there was very little food. And so they are emaciated. But they're not as emaciated as some of the Palestinians that were released on the same day from prison, who had to be carried off the bus in stretchers and were so gaunt and their faces so shrunken that people could hardly recognize them. So, you have to put this in this context.
I thought that was very interesting to put that in that sort, of context. Okay, but it underlines the point that from the Israeli point of view, they need to get the hostage deal done. They don't want to go through the 3 phases anymore. They want the hostages immediately freed. And Adelson put tremendous pressure on Trump to try to get that done. And he responded, with this ultimatum. to free all the hostages by Saturday or else.
The Saudi reaction to President Trump's statement about acquiring and owning and developing Gaza.
5 words you pronounce wrong 2 years before your brain starts shutting down.
Was severe,
Yes.
out of character for the Saudi government. In fact, they referred to Trump and his idea as extremist twice in the statement. Is that sending a message to him?
Well, I think they hope to send that message. But equally, as I said to you, they will do what Trump asks for one particular.
Oh, sorry.
Mohammed bin Salman wants to be king. Now, he's not at the top of, if you like, the tree. There are other brothers and cousins that are ahead of him in terms of becoming king. He's not, if you like, in the sort of like in the British case of being, you know, the heir to the throne. He is one of many heirs to the throne, many of whom may contest his rise to the throne. And America is hugely powerful in Saudi Arabia. And I think it was Mohammed bin Zayed who advised him and said, listen, the only way you can go from being crown prince and go to become king is via Washington and the lobby in Washington. And so I think that, you know, at the point at which this becomes key, I think that Trump will remind him and say, well, you know, you wish to become king when your father dies, who's in hospital and on sort of life support. Well, if that depends on me. So I think you should do what I say.
How do you think Prime Minister Netanyahu reacted to learning of Donald Trump's view on he will not support an attack on Iran? Michael Waltz told Ron Dermer the president will not support an attack on Iran. Ron Dermer presumably told Prime Minister Netanyahu, oh, this must have been a tremendous setback for him.
It was a tremendous setback. So, you know, although one, you know, rightly may say things about the way President Trump is trying to loosen up politics in the region, it's nonetheless a sort of valid path ahead to try and, you know, shock and surprise people so that they loosen up their politics. But it has consequences. The use of language has consequences, and the way you speak about other people does have consequences. The way he spoke about Palestinians as if it was just a real estate thing, that again is, I think, intentional. It's intentional because he's taking it out of the history, out of all the, you know, the structures of ideology, politics, and religion, and trying to bring it down to the most basic transactional level. But sometimes that's not possible. Sometimes it just doesn't work, and it may go wrong. But with Iran, this does undermine the key element, because Iran has said, we're not going to negotiate with the Americans. The supreme leader has issued an injunction to the reformers and said there's to be no negotiations at all with the United States.
Even though the
And-
reformers are determined.
Okay, so there's been a lot of new information that I hadn't heard here before. Okay, specifically with respect to Mohammed, with respect to the succession, okay, in Saudi Arabia, okay, and bin Salman's desire to become the king, of course, and how there are rivals there, and how Trump has power to influence the choice inside of Saudi Arabia. Okay, there was an event that just occurred. Bin Salman made available $600 billion to Trump for the rebuilding of Gaza. He said he was going to do that, and he went ahead and did it. Now, he didn't do what Trump suggested, that he contributed $1 trillion to the rebuilding of Gaza, but he did come up with the $600 billion. So he's trading with Trump on that. But Saudi is also insisting that there's got to be a state for the Palestinians, and they're being very firm about that. So bin Salman is walking a fine line there. At the same time, he's also trying to walk the BRICS path, okay, as well. So things are very complex for him. And I wasn't really fully attuned to that until I saw this video from Alastair. The other point, I think, which is really an important one, okay, is that that Trump is at once still trying to shake things up and unwind the politics somewhat. But on the other hand, he's bowing to Adelson in terms of insisting on the release of all the hostages by Saturday at 12 o'clock. Just thinking through what that would mean, we're not just talking about the release of all the Israeli hostages. He's calling for the release of all the hostages by 12 o'clock. Okay, now the Israelis have a huge number of hostages of their own that they were supposed to release, okay, as part of this deal. I think they're in the many hundreds. Are the Israelis really going to release all these people by 12 noon on Saturday? I don't think the Israelis are, at all prepared to do that. The other thing that Alastair has made clear here, which is very important, is that in the internal politics of Iran, okay, I hadn't known that the supreme leader had said to the reformers, to Pezeshkian, that there's to be no negotiation with the United States, okay, because the reformers were pushing very hard for negotiations. Okay, but the supreme leader would not sit still for this bid by Trump to make the whole thing a real estate deal and strip away all the religious aspects and all the cultural aspects and all the moral aspects and all those kinds of things. Because, of course, the supreme leader never operates that way. He always operates in terms of the religious framework and the moral framework that he has. That's fundamental to him and fundamental to Iran. So Trump really cannot do anything about that. He cannot get a settlement with the Iranians unless there's a Palestinian state as part of that settlement. I don't know whether Trump really realizes that yet. Okay, but the interpretations that we've gotten here, from Alastair of what the Iranians are thinking suggest that Trump's idea about doing a big deal with Iran is impossible as long as Trump sticks with the idea of the U.S. owning Gaza. Nothing will happen with respect to Iran in that context. Nothing will happen except for further conflict going on.
To have a normalized commercial relationship between the United States and Iran.
Yes, but the reformists don't count in this. In the constitution of Iran, the president is largely responsible for the administration internally of the country. He doesn't have a particular role like in the United States for foreign policy at all. The foreign policy lies with the Supreme National Council in Iran, which is headed by the supreme leader or his nominee. But it is the supreme leader who has ultimate authority on foreign policy. And Pezeshkian, or the president, does not have it. It is determined by the collective wisdom of the National Security Council. He has a place on the National Security Council, but so does the Revolutionary Guard, so do the intelligence service, so does the army. All of those have a place, and it comes to a collective decision. And they will not, if you like, deviate from a statement like that by the supreme leader that he does not believe there's any point whatsoever to talking to the United States, and particularly Mr. Trump, because he has broken the agreement, the previous agreement, when he, if you like, derogated from the JCPOA, which is the nuclear deal, after having not fulfilled all the components of the deal.
This 4 Japanese herbs shrinks your...
He didn't stick to the deal precisely, and Obama didn't, and he does not accept to negotiate. So the reformers have no choice. They've been told very clearly, you'll have to stick to this. Is this a forever injunction? No, politics is not, there's no such thing as never, but this is quite serious. And I would just add that I think this is something similar to the sort of feeling I got in Russia in this last week. That I mean, I see people all sort of coming agog about, that Trump has talked to Putin and that everything is moving along. I'm not sure that it is quite like that. I think that there have been soundings from his team, but in a sort of meeting, particularly a summit between the president, a lot of work has to be done, preliminary work on the agenda, what's going to be discussed and when. And the Russians are very hard-nosed about this. If America comes back and says, we want to discuss a frozen conflict in Ukraine, and if you like, some form of a demilitarized zone there, what's there to talk about will be their reaction. We've told you many times, it's not for discussion. Did you not get it? You should get it. That's what our position is. So if you want to talk, so there's been, I think, some sort of toing and froing. I don't know the details, of course, but my sense is the Russians are taking a very, firm and principled sort of, in their view, stand on this and say, no, sorry. And I think what's going on is what I've said a few times, is that the only way out of this, because they're not going to discuss the sort of proposals that the West is thinking of for Ukraine, but they're ready to discuss a big picture, the security of the region, on which Ukraine will be one small part, but a big picture discussion of the future of the spheres of influence. America's making a sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere. Russia will have a sphere of influence, and where those two will come together, and how to manage, if you like, that point of intersection of those two spheres. What to do about nuclear missiles? What to do about nuclear weapons? How to manage the whole, if you like, of Eurasia? What is its sphere of security? And I think you would have to start off by just saying one simple phrase to get this. Security is indivisible. You can't give security half to one state and half to another state. That doesn't work. Security has to be indivisible. And that's what they're saying, and that's what I think it would be very good for the team to say that they have heard it.
Before we go and getting back to
Okay, at this point, I want to raise the issue of the agreement capability of the United States, or perhaps I should say, the perceived agreement capability of the United States by the nations the United States says that it wants to negotiate with. You've had now years and years of experience on the part of the Russians with the collective West, including the United States, going back on agreements that it has made, so that the perception in Moscow, it's very clear. At this point, there is always the question, are the Americans' agreement capable? Can they be trusted to make an agreement, and to keep an agreement? Because the experience of the Russians has been that the collective West, as it is backed by the United States, when they enter into agreements, they do not keep them. They do not keep them. Now, this is the experience of the Iranians also. When the supreme leader says he doesn't see the point of negotiating with the United States right now, the reason why, in part, is the experience with Trump when he last was president, when he broke an agreement. He withdrew unilaterally from an agreement. And by the way, the rest of the West insisted on Iran keeping to that agreement for some time. And Iran showed good faith and actually did for a few years keep to an agreement which the United States had already broken. So, what is the impression of Iran about whether the United States is agreement capable? It is like the Russian experience with the collective West and with the United States. And the question arises, are we agreement capable? And here's Trump. He backs this ceasefire agreement. And he forced it on Netanyahu and Israel to take this particular agreement. And Adelson comes in on a plane, and the Israelis get all worried about whether the hostages are going to be alive. And they do various things to break the agreement because they've been killing Palestinians while the ceasefire agreement is supposed to be on. And so the Iranians looking at this, Hamas looking at this, Hezbollah looking at this, all the parties looking at this, what is the question that arises in their minds? Are the Americans agreement capable? And I'll say one thing here. Before we can be successful in international relations, before we can be successful in actually collaborating with other nations, we have to be viewed by them once again as a people, as a nation that will keep its agreements. We have breached that trust in all kinds of ways. And if we want to have peace in the world, we have to change that perception and the reality behind it. Let's look at the last part of this video and winding it up. But these points, made by Alastair, all through this video, a string of very, very, very important points about the real situation surrounding the possibility of the agreement in West Asia and surrounding the possibility of the agreements in Ukraine.
To Israel. Netanyahu has 9 lives like a cat. But what's your gut as to how much longer he'll be the prime minister?
I've always said to you, I think, he is a survivor, and it's extraordinary how he survives. I think it's coming to an end. And I think this is why, one of the reasons why Trump did what he did in Washington. It's better the devil you know than the devil you don't know, because no one knows what happens if his government falls. It's going to be deeply contentious, deeply divided country who don't know what's ahead and are deeply divided in about the way ahead. Yes, of course, many Israelis, 80% support the ethnic cleansing of Palestinians from the area. But that is not realistic either. They know it's not realistic, that it is a fabricated reality. So how long do they go on before they start thinking about what is realistic? What can we realistically do in this region, because what they've done so far has made it almost impossible to contemplate the idea of their assimilation into the region in a peaceful way.
Alastair Crook, a pleasure.
Okay, so that final point is a critical point also. In the end, when all is said and done, the Israelis, if they want to retain their state, have to find a way to live with their neighbors. They have been looking at this in a very, very unrealistic way, thinking they can dominate the whole Middle East and subordinate their neighbors. They've been relying on the power of the United States to help them do that. And they've been just as unrealistic as the United States in evaluating the power which the United States still retains. And just as unrealistic as the United States in evaluating the power that the opponents of Israel have managed to accumulate over a period of years. They don't recognize the changes in the power dynamics in geopolitics that we see in West Asia, and then beyond West Asia in the larger world. The accumulation of power by the Chinese, accumulation of power by the Russians. They don't recognize that. They don't recognize how it relates to West Asia, okay, in terms of Iranian power. Just this past week, the news broke, the Russians were sending SR-35 jets to the Iranians. The SR-35s are the rough equivalent of the F-35s. There was no contemplation before this that the Iranian Air Force would have planes that were the equivalent of the F-35s, or the rough equivalent of the F-35s. I think indications are the S-35s, the SR-35s, or whatever they're called, okay, are actually better than the F-35s. The F-35s have a maintenance problem. They only get into the air 50% of the time, a tremendous maintenance burden on them. I suspect the SR-35s are much better, when it comes to the maintenance aspect. And they're supposed to have some other advantages over the F-35s too. But when you add the fact the Russians are shipping these planes to the Iranians, and you add the augmentation of their air defense systems too, getting the S-400, air defense systems into Iran, and you add that to, the hypersonic missiles of Iran, we're talking some very formidable stuff. So I think the military balance in West Asia is really shifting. And if the Israelis insist on not making a deal to live in peace with their neighbors, and then keep to that deal, then I fear for the existence of Israel within 5 to 10 years, and maybe before that. If the Israelis keep going down the path that they are going, the path of attempted conquest of everyone in sight and everything in sight, I don't think the United States will be able to save them from the military power, the growing military power, of their neighbors. So I want to leave this topic with that final point. Have you anything to add, Dee?
I think you pretty much said it all.
Okay, you like that treatment?
I thought it was very good.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, let's get on to the next of our topics. Oh, there's Evelina. Let's take some comments then. Evelina says, I would like to think Dems will be a formidable opposition, but it remains to be seen. As you say, it remains to be seen. Evelina says, I have small hope for either party. Sherry says, hi, Joe. I have small hope for either party, but I'm thinking that if the impeachment of Trump occurs, in the end, in the impeachment and conviction, it may or may not be a matter of parties. Instead, it may be a matter of Congress people wanting to safeguard the powers, okay, and the prerogatives of their offices. What good is it, okay, to be a congressman if you have the executive branch usurping all your authority? Then what do you mean to your constituents? What can you offer to your constituents, okay, as a congressperson? So I don't know how much the parties are going to be involved here, as much as Congress people who are very angry at the executive branch infringing on their prerogatives and their powers under the Constitution. I think anger about that will be growing the more Trump attempts what he's attempting to do. And in the end, I think that may be what's going to bring him low. Evelina says that she has a lot of ambivalence for both of the parties. I have more than ambivalence. I hate them. Evelina says, Alastair doesn't think Trump's bullying approach will work without downsides, which is an upside for us who wish to see a Palestinian state. I agree. And Evelina says, Alastair is great at providing context. He is. He is wonderful at getting a multi-dimensional perspective on a particular problem. Okay, let us move on to the next one. So, Dee, this is a piece by Pepe Escobar. It's on the tantrums of Donald Trump and much else. Would you like to read that one?
Sure.
I will then share the screen. Okay, the name of the piece is Keep on Trumpin'.
It's a good title.
Yes.
He has a sense of humor.
He has a great sense of humor. And it was posted today. And there is the orange man himself. I guess looking particularly orange today.
Yes. Either Ukraine surrenders unconditionally, or the war show must go on. Meanwhile, let's keep on trumping.
Indeed. Let's keep on trumping.
Mr. Disco Inferno has reverted to his default mode of throwing tantrum after tantrum because nearly everyone in West Asia and beyond is saying no to the Gaza Riviera resort and casino scam. Here's a partial pileup. Egypt. The Palestinians will not be ethnic cleansed there, or here, or in Jordan, or anywhere else. Saudi Arabia, we will not normalize with Israel before there is a sovereign Palestinian state. Turkey
Okay,
via
to
Sultan
comment
Erdogan.
on that. Okay, to comment on that. Based on what Alastair said, I'm sure that Trump will try to use the influence of America inside of Saudi to try to change the mind of bin Salman about that. And the politics perhaps will get very, very rough about that. And the question is how strong, will be um, 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 uh, will MBS be compared to other contenders for the throne? Because that context, okay, is likely to heat up and may change the situation with respect to Saudi Arabia.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, please go on.
Turkey via Sultan Erdogan. No power can remove Palestinians from their, quote, eternal homeland. Arab League. This is a, quote, complete detachment from reality. Hamas. There will be no more ceasefire violations. Iran via leader Khamenei. We will not negotiate anything with you. And this is just the beginning. Russia via Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov, quote, Washington's attempt to give Moscow's ultimatums or to demonstrate the alleged, quote, big favor in exchange for unacceptable U.S. demands are doomed to failure in the dialogue with Russia. So we should expect Mr. Disco Inferno to go totally ballistic in the next few days, literally burning the geopolitical dance floor. Burning, burning, Disco Inferno, burning, burning, burning that mother down.
Burn that mother down.
Yep. Now, give me 500 billion in rare earth metals. Mr. Disco Inferno has stated that under his Gaza Riviera scheme, Palestinians would have no right of return after they are expelled because, quote, they are going to have much better housing. It's so stupid.
I know.
That will significantly that will signify the normalization of ethnic cleansing under a Nakba 2.0 on steroids, billed as a quote humanitarian real estate development opportunity in a quote phenomenal location. It's no wonder that even feeble Arab vassals of the Empire of Chaos had to reject it. Not to mention that would Nakba 2.0 be implemented, Palestinian armed resistance will go sky high, with instrumental input by a rejuvenated Hezbollah. The Trump Gaza Riviera resort and casino scheme is essentially reviving an Israeli Ministry of Intelligence deportation framework detailed as early as in October 13th, 2023, and leaked by the Israeli news magazine Kakalis 11 days later.
Amazing.
Yep. At the time, the plan called to deport the people of Gaza to North Sinai after totally, quote, clearing Gaza and installing them on tent cities in a, quote, closed security zone within Egypt. This plan was at least partly implemented. Then, in May 2024, Netanyahu's office came up with an even more detailed four-step plan, which started with what else? Quote, demolition.
Incredible.
Yep. Trump has used the exact terminology to describe Gaza. The Israeli plan included setting up, quote, Hamas-free zones supervised by an UAE-led coalition designing, quote, new cities from scratch. And if everything went well, swell. Rinse and repeat in Lebanon, Syria, and Yemen. We may be on a stage one of this plan. Yep,
These people are crazy.
they are.
Crazy. They're all going to be rocketed and missiled out of existence.
Right. They are provoking. They are seriously provoking. Yeah, you talk about poking the bear, poking it and poking and poking.
Yeah, it's not simply a provocation. It's they're attacking the existence of the Palestinians, and they're attacking status quo of all the other nations of the Middle East at this time. And they expect that these nations are not going to rise against them. I mean, they are totally foolish. They haven't calculated what kind of military power they're facing.
Right.
I mean, if Turkey and Iran and Egypt all come together against them, they can't project a sufficient amount of U.S. power to Western Asia to defeat that kind of coalition. And I haven't even spoken of the axis of resistance. I haven't included Hezbollah here and the Houthis and the Iraqi resistance. Okay, all of these are factors, and we don't have anything to counter it. The
No, we
carriers
don't.
will be sitting ducks, and the American bases in the Middle East will be sitting ducks.
Exactly.
And even here, we're assuming the Chinese are not going to intervene, and we're assuming the Russians are not going to intervene. Okay, and the Russians can intervene. They started intervening already by shipping air defense systems and SR 35s to Iran. And the hotter this situation gets, the more intervention from them is going to occur because their military factories are operating 24/7
Mm-hmm.
and turning out tanks and planes and ammunitions and all the weapons of war that they'll be happy to ship to the Iranians. In other words, we wanted to start this war, uh, with respect to Ukraine in order to weaken Russia. I'm sure Russia would be happy to ship all kinds of military equipment to the Iranians in order to weaken us.
Yeah.
I mean, two can play at that game. And right now, we haven't been playing very well at it.
No, we haven't.
Okay, please go on.
Gaza is in fact the toxic blueprint for a much larger and insidious NATO project,
Oh,
en- encompassing vast tracts of West Asia, as Israel all the way through has been weaponized by US and UK. Turkey continued to supply it with Azeri oil from the BTC pipeline, and Arab leadership has behaved like kunaks, at least
the
until
word, okay, the word there is, eunuchs.
Unix. Okay, I didn't see it. It looks like a C to me here. Okay,
Okay, what they are but castrated males.
okay.
Okay,
Yes, at least until the announcement of the Gaza Riviera. That the Gaza Riviera is the thing that finally got them going.
yes.
Co- Compared to the upgraded Forever Wars chapter in West Asia, the Forever Wars chapter in Ukraine is a much tougher proposition. Mr. Disco Inferno's much typed peace plan for Ukraine was actually put on hold as he decided to send his special envoy, retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg, to the Munich Secretary Conference to feel the pulse of the NATO vessels. Translation: Let's cut a deal on all those rare earth metals. The sweaty sweatshirt actor in Kiev is ready to give up all available Ukrainian land and resources to save himself. Problem is, the absolute majority of those rare earth metals are now in Novorossiysk and already in the possession of Russia.
Right, because this is all the eastern part
Right.
of Ukraine that Russia has already conquered.
Mr. Disco Inferno did not beat around the bush. Quote, they have very valuable lands in terms of rare earth metals, oils, and gas. I want our money to be protected. We are spending hundreds of billions of dollars, and they may make a deal. They may not. They may become Russian someday. They may not become Russian. But we will have all this money, and I say I want it back. I said I want the equivalent of, say, 500 billion in rare earth metals. And they basically agreed to that. So at least we don't feel like fools.
To comment on that, he may not feel like a fool, but he's going to look like a fool
Yeah.
because the rare earths are in the Russian areas. And the longer the war lasts, the more and more the rare earths are going to be in areas Russia is conquering and has conquered. And so the so called promise by the sweaty sweatshirt actor,
Yeah.
there's nothing backing that promise
No.
because he won't have any rare earth metals to give. So there will be no 500 billion in rare earth metals. This is just another fantasy of Donald Trump's.
And you got Lindsey Graham is the one that keeps saying, we're not leaving Ukraine. And he keeps talking about the metals and this and that.
I know it's full of crap.
Yeah. U.S. Russia relations, quote, on the verge of rupture. Kellogg is dismissed in Moscow circles of power as, quote, a representative of the U.S. industrial military complex, and more bluntly, as the proverbial imperial asset, a militarily illiterate, Cold War style general with zero knowledge of geopolitics. Whenever he opens his mouth in public, that is duly confirmed. Moreover, his daughter, Megan Mobbs, is the president of the R.T. Weatherman Foundation, which since the start of the war in 2022 runs a logistical hub on the border with Romania to evacuate wounded and killed American mercenaries to a medical center in Germany, as well as to deliver different firms of aid to Ukraine.
Yeah, I think it should be forms of aid to Ukraine. I think that's a typo.
Yeah. In January 2023, our foundation sponsored Kellogg's trip to Ukraine, after which he called the U.S. Senate to, quote, provide Ukraine with the weapons it needs to defeat Russia's military, implement strict accountability measures for the military assistance, and do it now. The mood, the mood in informed Moscow is that a potential U.S.-Russia negotiation will have less than zero effect on the current plans of Russia's general staff. On the battlefield, Russian forces continue to advance and consolidate what is defined as a, quote, road net, former Ukrainian supply routes, preparing for better weather in spring, which will potentialize even more their advantage on air power and drones. Once again, it was Rybov who laid down the line on what Moscow expects from Trump 2.0. The first step towards normalizing bilateral relations, meaning negotiations based on the principles of mutual respect and equality, should be taken by the United States. We are open to dialogue, ready to negotiate in tough bargaining mode, taking into account the realities on the ground and our national interest, predetermined by history and geography. So the decisions and choices are up to Trump and his team. Trump and his team is kind of like a scary word right there,
I
scary
know,
sentence.
I know, I know. It's like saying, so the decisions and choices are up to Trump and his dumbasses.
Yeah,
He's got a bunch of dumbasses there.
yeah, and it's like you can't make this shit up. It's
Yeah, I mean,
crazy.
this Kellogg guy is really thick. Totally thick. I think the smartest of the lot is Marco Rubio.
Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, yeah, little Marco.
The problem is the empire of chaos does not do, quote, mutual respect and equality. It is exceptionalist by definition. The empire of chaos does not do dialogue. It's always my way or the highway. And the memory impaired empire of China dismisses both history and, oh wait, the empire of chaos
Yes.
dismisses both history and geography. After detailing how, quote, relations between Moscow and Washington are balancing on the verge of rupture, how Russia, quote, sees no practical changes in the U.S.'s Ukrainian policy, how Moscow and Washington, quote, have not yet agreed on high level contracts, and how Moscow, quote, does not expect its relations with Washington to get much better. Under Trump 2.0, Rayev, as a clincher, in fact, already painted the big picture ahead. Quote, Washington's attempt to give Moscow ultimatums or to demonstrate the alleged, quote, big favor in exchange for unacceptable U.S. demands are doomed to failure in the dialogue with Russia. Neither Trump nor Kellogg seem to have gotten the message. Not to mention that the CIA is feeding them a comet of stupidities when it comes to the state of the Russian economy. Russia's economy grew by 4.1% in 2024. Energy and raw materials continue to be sold across the global majority and bring in a lot of revenue, which now stays in Russia, because transferring capital out is nearly impossible. So now all profits are invested across Russia, which was not the case before the start of the SMO nearly 3 years ago. The war may be far from the war may be far from Moscow, over 1,000 kilometers. The Russian economy as a whole can now be characterized largely as a war economy. The revival of the arms industry generated a lot of jobs in several provinces and, in fact, redistributed the flow of money within Russia. All the bombast coming from Trump, the inanities coming from Kellogg, and the massive PR to come out of the Munich Security Conference won't alter facts on the battlefield. There will be no two-bit quote ceasefire. Either Ukraine surrenders unconditionally or the war show must go on. Meanwhile, it keeps on trumping.
Yeah, I thought that was a great piece. Okay, I generally agree with it completely. I think it brought very many factors into evaluation of what the negotiation situation is. The only thing I missed, okay, was that I think if Russia is going to negotiate at all, what has to be on the table. Okay, and I think Pepe knows this because he's said it, enough time. I don't know why he didn't actually put a paragraph in it here. Okay, but I think from the Russian point of view, whether Ukraine surrenders unconditionally doesn't really matter, okay, because they're going to take the parts of Ukraine they want to take, and nothing can stop them, and they're not going to make a deal about that. What they want on the table for a negotiation is this broader idea of a Eurasian security framework. If you recall, that was one of the big points of Alastair, in his video. That's what the Russians are after. That's what they want to talk to the United States about. And if there is a negotiation on that kind of framework with Trump, a big deal, the kind of big deal that Trump should like, if there is a negotiation on that, what happens to Ukraine will fall out of that deal. In other words, I don't think the Russians are going to actually negotiate about what happens to Ukraine proper. I think they're going to want to negotiate the broader deal first. And then within that framework, it will be easy to settle on what happens to Ukraine. I think the Russians will settle on the continued existence of a Ukraine state, okay, but one that is denazified, completely neutralized, and demilitarized. Those were the war aims of the Russians, and they're in a position to enforce those war aims on Ukraine. So they'll get that as part of the framework, and the U.S. will agree to that as part of the framework, because Trump will have his bigger deal that gets him out of Europe, or pretty much out of Europe, with no further great expenditures in Europe. He's obviously looking for that. He's looking for the Europeans to defend themselves. Okay, so he's looking for that security framework so we can leave Europe and we can come home or concentrate on Asia, or on Latin America. So I think maybe the Russians will be able to persuade Trump to actually negotiate this larger deal, because if the larger deal works and it looks like a pretty good one, it makes him a big hero. And he loves to be a big hero. And if he makes that larger deal, he will be due tremendous credit, because he will have avoided a nuclear war. And he would have gotten us out of Europe, as a big time sort of military intervener in Europe, for the first time since the end of the Second World War. That will be quite an accomplishment. So that, I think, is very important.
And I think also, if you can get some construction going, real estate bids like he loves doing.
Oh, yeah, and then he can make money
Yeah.
as well, which, of course, is always on his mind, how he can make money through being the president of the United States. So that's a very big thing for him. By the way, speaking of that, I heard something the other day, which I think is very important. Evidently, 80 to 85% of the meme coin that Trump, that he issued before coming into the presidency, that his corporation issued, 80 to 85% of the purchases of that kind are from the whale billionaires, the major billionaires, the important ones. They've collaborated to buy that coin, which is now worth something like $56 billion to Trump. Okay, so this has at once has made Trump now extremely rich, one of their clubs, with respect to money, and in some ways very powerful. But it also gives them tremendous power over Trump, because if they decide to dump that coin, of course they lose a lot of money themselves, but they make Trump far poorer, okay, overnight. So they're in a position to threaten, the dumping of the coin. He doesn't want them to dump that coin because that's worth $56 billion to them. So in a sense, the coin seals the marriage of Donald Trump with the billionaires. Okay, I don't think many people have realized that yet. But I think it's an important sort of background factor to much that is going to go on both domestically and in international politics. So, okay, let's go on to the next topic. Okay, those are two relatively short pieces from Larry Johnson. Okay, on Putin dealing reality to Trump. And then there's a final article. So I think what I'll do is I'll take these two relatively short pieces, okay, and then you can do the final article, if that's okay.
And that's fine, yes.
Okay. So let me share the screen for the first of these articles, which is in a way just a side piece, but it's important to simply note. Okay, there are all these statements in Congress constantly being made, anti-Iranian statements saying, the Iranians are terrorists, they're terrible terrorists, and we have to oppose them because they're terrorists. We have to have a war with them because they're terrorists, because Iran is the major sponsor, okay, of terrorism. So Larry Johnson says in this piece, he says, according to U.S. government data, Iran is not the major sponsor of terrorism. And how does he prove that? Well, he looked at the data presented in the statistical annex of the U.S. Department of State's annual report. So this is based on U.S. State Department data, country reports on terrorism. According to this, the major perpetrators of terrorism are Sunni groups, not Iran, nor groups that are allegedly sponsored by Iran. The Sunni groups receive financial support from the Gulf Arabs and, ironically, from the United States. Okay, so we're supporting the terrorism ourselves. Okay, the definition of terrorism, according to Netanyahu, and I agree with him, is violence against civilians for political purposes. Simple and direct, says Larry. So he copied the tables from the Annex of Statistical Information for the years 2016 to 2023. He says the data in these tables tell the story. ISIS has been the most active and prolific terrorist group for the 8 years presented in the spreadsheets. One group that is a subsidiary of ISIS, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, is placed in the top 10 of the groups with most attacks for 5 of the last 6 years. And guess who the CIA helped come to power in Syria? That would be Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. It is noteworthy we've learned this week, thanks to Elon Musk, that U.S. aid funneled funds to al-Nusra. For those of you not familiar with al-Nusra, it came into existence out of ISIS, and one of its leaders was a guy by the name of Muhammad al-Jawlani, who later created Hayat Tahrir al-Sham and is now the de facto leader of Syria. The U.S. had a $10 million bounty on his head until Joe Biden's State Department made it go away. It is only in 2023 3 groups with ties to Iran appear in the top 10 list: the Houthis, Ansar Allah, Hamas, and Hezbollah. The U.S. decision to place the Houthis, Hamas, and Hezbollah on this list is because of their attacks on Israel, which have been directed primarily at military targets, not civilian ones. Prior to 2023, neither Hamas nor Hezbollah was identified as groups with the most attacks worldwide. Guess who killed more civilians than Hamas and Hezbollah combined in 2023? That would be Israel. but the U.S. refuses to identify Israeli attacks on unarmed civilians as terrorism or genocide. Elon Musk's revelations that U.S. aid has provided millions of U.S. taxpayer dollars. Of course, we know there's no such thing as taxpayer dollars. It's not a thing. To groups the U.S. labels as terrorists exposes the galling hypocrisy of U.S. policy for combating terrorism. An honest assessment of the data makes it clear the United States has been a facilitator of terrorism. Keep that in mind, and next time you hear someone from the Trump administration insist that we must crush Iran because it sponsors terrorism. Okay. A nation that lives in a glass house should not throw rocks. Of course, the old saying is should not throw stones, but okay. So there that is. So, okay, here we go. This is, State Department data from 2016 and 2015. And you can see that, there's some appearance of the Houthi extremists, so-called, but most of the action comes from, it's considerable action actually from the Maoist party in India, from the Taliban, from Sunni Islamic groups. There's none from Iran, but directly, no terrorism, from Iran in 2015 and 2016. If you compare 2017 to 2016, okay, again, it's pretty much the same groups except for Boko Haram in West Africa, and that is an ISIS group. So again, Sunni Islamics. Okay. For 2018, the worst of the Taliban, ISIS, al-Shabaab, also Boko Haram, the Communist Party of the Philippines, 194 incidents, Communist Party of India, 177 incidents. The Kurdistan Workers' Party, also the Kurds are Sunni Islam, okay, but the honest, they're not particularly religious. Also, it's controversial to say they're terrorists because they're resisting, because they want a nation of their own. So one might say they have the right of resistance. Okay, there is HTS on that list. And also there are individual incidents, and ISIS Khorasan, which has 101. Total number of incidents there is 3340. Anyway, if you go down the list, all the other tables, one can see that the generalizations that Larry has made are correct. It's mostly, Sunni Islamists. There are no Iranian-supported groups in here. They're just not there. When we get to 2018, 2019, again, no Iranian groups there. Okay. All ISIS. Okay. When we get to 2018, 2019, 2020, 21, 2001, and 2022, again, it's the same story. There are communist terrorists, and there are Sunni Muslims, and that's all there are across the whole world. Okay, now we get to 2023, and things change. Hamas appears. By the way, Hamas is Sunni Islam, so they still fit into that particular category. Okay, but there are 89 incidents from them in 2018, 45 in 2019, 25 in 2020, 4 in 2021, 11 in 2022, and then you hit 367 in 2023, and you can argue that they're not really a terrorist group, they're a resistance group that's being active in order to get a Palestinian state. And mostly the incidents they're involved in involve attacks on military installations rather than civilians. Okay, with respect to Hezbollah, and here we have a Shiite group involved for the first time, 3, 10, 15, 9, 8, and in 2023, 245 incidents. And why did they undertake the 245 incidents? Because the Israelis were attacking the Gaza Strip and Hezbollah in support of Hamas and the Palestinians, and the International Court of Justice were attacking the Israelis to stop the genocide they were beginning to perpetrate up there. So you can argue that these 245 incidents are not really terrorist incidents. The Houthis had 202 instruments here. Actually, the Houthis are increasingly active. 231, 319, 756, 303, 300, okay, and 202. Why were the Houthis so active all through this time? Because they were having a war with the Saudis. The Saudis were working against them because the Houthi insurgency was trying to take over the country of Yemen, and they've got about 80% of it now. So you can argue they were a resistance group too, and not, simple terrorists. Basically, people get on this list because the State Department, doesn't like them, not necessarily because they're terrorists. Okay, so most of these groups on here are still Sunni Muslim groups, even in 2023. So you've got that. So I wanted to go through that because it makes a very important point. It gives the lie to statements by the right wing in this country, by the Democrats too, that the Iranian supported group somehow are terrorists. They certainly are not the worst in the world. The worst in the world are by far the Sunni groups. So let me shift over. I don't see any comments about that. So let me go over to the next article. That's also by Larry Johnson. And that article gets back to one of the main issues we're talking about tonight. Is Putin's getting a dose of reality, giving a dose of reality to Trump, okay, and to the Americans? That's a picture, okay, of Mike Waltz there, who is the new version of Jake Sullivan, National Security Advisor, former congressman, who didn't have to be confirmed, actually, by the Congress, because the National Security Advisor does not have to be confirmed. And then we have Donald Trump, who's clapping. Don't know what that other picture is. President Trump, terrorists are enemy combatants, not the criminals, says the caption on that particular photo. Larry says, the diplomatic tango between Washington and Moscow is underway, but Trump's promise to bring a quick end to the war in Ukraine on Trump's terms appears more unlikely with each passing day. Prior to the conversation between the two leaders during the last 4 days, diplomats representing Moscow and Washington in their respective enemies did the detailed work of arranging the phone diplomacy. Okay, but according to Boris Gman, there were two, not one, conversations. This is Boris Gman, concise 8-minute video presenting the latest developments. Putin's position, I don't think I'll go through the video because I want this to be quick, but Putin's position is firm and unyielding. No ceasefire or freeze in place. recognize the 4 Ukrainian oblasts as Russian states and dismantle the military of Ukraine so that it can never join the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Conversations likely took place last week, perhaps as early as the 5th of February. Why? Because we learned on the 6th of February, the U.S. asked the U.K. to take over the chair of the Ukraine Defense Group, which is set to meet tomorrow, Tuesday, in Brussels. That was today. Trump is sending a message to both Putin and NATO, i.e., Ukraine is no longer viewed as a U.S. priority and that Europe is responsible for pulling Ukraine's chestnuts from the fire. This message was reinforced on Sunday when Trump's national security advisor, Michael Waltz, said the following. And I think an underlying principle here is that the Europeans have to own this conflict going forward. President Trump is going to end it. And then in terms of security guarantees, that will squarely going to be with the with the Europeans, including the future of U.S. aid to Ukraine. We need to recruit those costs, and that will be a partnership with the Ukrainians in terms of their rare earth, their natural resources, and their oil and gas, and also buying ours. Although it appears that Uncle Sam's Sugar Shack is now closed for future business with Ukraine, Waltz and Donald Trump still labor under the mistaken belief they have leverage over Russia because they believe it is suffering catastrophic losses and a weakening economy. According to Waltz, Russia's economy is not doing well. Trump, is prepared to tax, to tariff, to sanction. We need to get all sides of the table to end this war, and this has come up in conversations with President Xi, Prime Minister Modi, with leaders across the Middle East. Everybody is ready to help Trump in this war. Let's get both sides of the table and actually negotiate, unquote. Wrong on the economy, Mike. And this is a quote. I know not from where, but from Larry. In 2024, Russia's economy experienced growth with the rate reported at approximately 4.4%. Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin stated that the Russian economy grew by 4.1% in 2024, which is slightly better than the official forecast of 3.9%. Multiple sources indicate growth in 2023, with GDP increasing by 3.6%. The Russian government estimated Russia's GDP growth totaled 4% last year. The OECD estimates that Russia's GDP grew by 3.9%. Trump and his foreign policy team are wrongly assuming that Putin is desperate for a deal because, according to the bogus intel being fed to them, Russia is hurting and looking for a way to alleviate the pain. I am sure that Putin and his team will be setting that record straight. Trump also is wrong in believing he can enlist the leaders of China and India, as well as leaders across the Middle East, to pressure Putin to end the war. That might be a possibility if Trump was showering Xi and Modi with praise and promises of, strong economic relations. But Trump is doing the opposite. He's threatening both and imposing economic sanctions. Not exactly a good method for winning friends and influencing people. At the very time that Trump is trying to do a deal with Russia to end the war in Ukraine, Trump is endorsing Netanyahu's plan to blow up the ceasefire agreement and renew attacks on the Palestinians in Gaza. While Trump is smart in some of the domestic policies he's pursuing, I don't know which ones, Larry. He is exposing his ass with his obtuse grasp of the situation in Gaza and how U.S. sanctions in that region shape Russia's distrust of Trump and his policies. I do have to say something about the foreign policy people. A lot of the foreign policy people, and commenters, they are not strong when it comes to the issue of separation of powers. So when they make endorsing statements about what Trump is doing and some of his domestic policies he's pursuing, they neglect the way in which Trump is pursuing the domestic policies. which in terms of the constitutional structure of our government and the content of the Constitution, are terrible. In other words, we can debate about which of the domestic policies he has in mind would be a good policy. In order to implement those policies according to the way our system works, he has to get support from Congress. Now he has a chance of doing that because both houses now are controlled by the Republicans. And anyway, Democrats would go along with some of his programs if things weren't so polarized, which he is more responsible for than anybody else. Okay, but here the basic point is the instruments he's using to try to get these policies pursued, in domestic politics, involve basically neutering the Congress, and that's unconstitutional. So, okay, what Larry says here is he's exposing his ass with his obtuse grasp of the situation in Gaza and how the U.S. actions in that region shape Russia's distrust of Trump and his policies. So Larry's right about that. But he is also exposing his ass with his obtuse grasp of the separation of powers and how the kind of conflict that he's initiated with Congress is bound to eventually be unsuccessful and is bound to result in his own impeachment again, and perhaps this time his conviction, as well. So anyway, that's what I think, and that's the second article by Larry, which I think makes some very good points about the realities of foreign policy that Trump has to learn about. So let's see if there are any more comments at this point. Nope, the last comment, is from Evelina. So, I will now share the screen for the final article. Okay, Dee, this is your turf here.
Okay.
The author of this article, is Wa Bin. That's as close to the pronunciation as I can get.
Okay. Why is the U.S. reeking of the smell of fear? And it's February 10th, 2025.
And this is a follow-up to the previous article. The U.S. is reeking of the smell, of fear, unquote. And by the way, that was that sensational article on all of the weapons advantages that China now has in relation to the United States.
And it says here, I recently published a short opinion piece titled, quote, the U.S. is reeking the smell of fear on Substack and Un's Review. Okay, I received many comments and feedback. Most comments are positive, and many readers shared thoughtful observations. Predictably, some trolls, loonies, and racist crazies climbed out from under the rock and started to make the routine noises about the virtues of U.S. versus Communist China. Of course, in their usual fact-free fashion, as expected, there was no dispute about the facts and data. Venom seems the best the trolls can do. Exactly. Or any social media, such sore losers abound. China clearly lives rent-free in the minds of Washington elite and the many clueless defenders of the plutocracy. These defenders of the realm are never the plutocrats themselves, but the slaves who don't even know they are slaves. The plutocrats are generally smart and let the slaves get worked up. These comments always give me a tickle. Some wise man once said, everyone has an opinion, like they all have an asshole. Unlike anuses, brains are not evenly distributed. Dumb people make me feel superior. I love to push their buttons and blow the dog whistle, rubbing some salt into these sore losers. Open wounds seem a fun way to spend a Sunday hour.
Okay, I think here he's revealing a sadistic streak.
Uh-huh. In that spirit, there is a follow-up piece to "The U.S. is reeking the smell of fear." Why is the U.S. reeking of fear? Fear comes in many different forms, but the biggest cause for fear is a challenge to one's fundamental beliefs, the beliefs on which a person's worldview and frame of reference is built, however insane, bigoted, and moronic they may be. Try to reason with an evangelical Christian about the sins of Zionism and, quote, God's chosen people. Or to tell a Yank the Baseball World Series is just a national bowl game, not even a world event. You get my drift?
Yeah, I think that comment is particularly meaningful to me because when I was a kid, I was a fanatic Yankee fan.
Right.
And I certainly thought the Baseball World Series was a world event.
Yeah. What else were you supposed to think, right?
I have a better perspective now.
The rise of China, more accurately, the return of China, is such a challenge to several deeply held core beliefs of many in the West. The Chinese cannot innovate. The US is exceptional. The US can defeat China as it is stronger economically, technologically, and militarily. The neoliberal capitalist system in the US is inherently superior to the Chinese communist system, though few can define communism. China is an interloper in a world of, quote, the end of history that should be rightfully dominated by the US and its vassals. Quote, white people are superior to other races. Yeah, you hear that with these, I would have to say, a lot of these
Yes, you hear that?
nationalists, Christian nationalists, and just that.
Yeah, racist.
Yeah, none of the above is true. Here are some uncomfortable facts for the brainwashed. Consider this as free education to inform your public school educated mind. The Chinese can innovate. When Europe was still living in the Dark Ages, China gave the world a few modest innovations: paper, printing press, gunpowder, compass, silk, and its namesake, China. The Chinese invented paper in the 2nd century during the Yin dynasty.
uh, it's the Han Dynasty.
Oh, yeah, 'cause I didn't see the line in between because I thought it was kind of weird.
Yes.
The Europeans didn't get the technology until 12 centuries later through the Arabians. The Chinese invented gunpowder, known as black powder, in the 9th century during Tang Dynasty. Europeans learned about this technology from the Mongols in the 13th century. At that at the receiving end of it. The Chinese sailed to Africa and the Arabian Peninsula, the Iberian Peninsula in 1405 on ships 10 times bigger than the Portuguese who started the Age of Discovery a century later. Columbus didn't arrive in the Americas until 1492. The Chinese built the Great Wall and the Grand Canal before the Europeans had the concept of public works. No European capital could carry water for Dadu called Beijing today, when Marco Polo visited in the 13th century. In 2014, the vaulted Harvard Business Review published a cover story titled Why China Can't Innovate. In 2021, It ate its own words and published another one titled China's New Innovation Advantage. From cannot innovate to innovative advantage in 7 years. Pretty funny for a prestigious publication to say water is not wet and then say water is wet after all a few days later. The Information Technology and Innovation founded ITIF published a lengthy study on Chinese innovation in September 2024 titled China is Rapidly Becoming the Leading Innovator in Advanced Industries. Written from a U.S. perspective, it nevertheless presents an honest review of the history and performance of Chinese technological and industrial innovations.
And the author is kind enough to include a link,
Yes,
okay, to that study, which I think everybody ought to read.
yes. In the field of AI, the Paulson Institute in Chicago reported 47% AI talents are in China. Among the top AI research institutes in the U.S., Chinese researchers account for 38%, more than any other nationalities, including Americans. If you find it hard to believe, you walked into any PhD programs in top tier U.S. universities and check out the percentage of Chinese anesthesies. Here is a kicker. China is not only the only country that operates its own space station, but also can send astronauts to the station and return them to Earth pretty much on schedule. All the sour grape quote technology theft talk is a made up smear tactic and less believable than a second-hand car salesman. Ask some first principle questions. How do you steal something from someone who don't even have it? Like sixth generation fighter landing a rover on the dark side of the moon instead of the fake Apollo moon landing. How come you are so dumb and suck so badly to let an adversary to steal your top military high-tech industrial secrets decades after decade? Can you share some specific examples of tech and IP theft? Why is no one in China stealing KFC's secret fried chicken recipe instead of letting KFC China grow into 50% of Yum Brand's global business? The chicken people seem to have better cybersecurity than NSA. The US is not exceptional. No doubt it has done great things and led the world in the second and third industrializations. The US also has done horrible things and great harm to many parts of the world, including the people originally inhabiting the land. The US empire is not particularly virtuous. Its history is still with genocide, slavery, deceit, racial apartheid, and violence. Ever since its deep state blew off JFK's head in a public execution and open coup, the U.S. is a de facto mafia rogue state. From unilateral wars of aggression based on lies, 9/11 false flag attacks against its own population, complicity in Israeli genocides, use of outlawed weapons, deleted uranium, and white phosphorus bombs, extrajudicial killings, concentration camps that make Nazis look good, Al Ghraib and Guantanamo, legalized torture dubbed as enhanced interrogation, illegal regime changes dubbed as color revolutions, sponsoring of terrorists like ISIS, and proxy wars that have killed millions in Ukraine and Syria. The U.S. is exceptional only in the sense it acts above international laws and can flaunt the so-called rule-based order anytime it wants. The U.S. exception means committing crimes with impunity. A good book to read on the subject is Aaron Good's The American Exception. Pax Americana is nothing but, quote, the security of the slaves, as JFK put it in his famous peace speech. Just look at Europe. The most truly exceptional thing about the U.S. is the exceptional hypocrisy the regime hides its crimes behind as it promotes its criminality and hegemony under the pretense of human rights, freedom, motherhood, and apple pie. Have you noticed how Trump is sanctioning the ICC for prosecuting the live broadcast genocides by the Israeli Jews?
Okay, I appreciated the distinction he's making there by the Israeli Jews, okay, as opposed to by the Jews.
Yes,
In other words, it would have been easy for him to say the latter, but he was careful.
right. The U.S. regime operates as a mafia don. Trump's recent extortion of Canada, Panama, and Greenland makes it clear what kind of actor it really is. The longer the undeserved U.S. sense of superiority lasts, the further they will fall behind. May their ignorance know no bounds. The U.S. cannot defeat China in a war, hot or cold. The economic decoupling the U.S. has pursued in the last 8 years have failed to slow China down. Instead, Chinese trade where am I? Instead, Chinese trade is booming with largest ever trade surplus in human history. 1 trillion in 2024. It is the largest trading partner with 140 plus countries in the world. China is now leading in more critical industries than ever, from cars, high-speed trains, shipbuilding, AI, 5G, robotics, drone, critical minerals, green energy, and military technologies. I can go on and on. China accounts for 36% of global manufacturing. 70% of Amazon and Walmart sales come from products sourced from China. The tech chokehold the U.S. has put on China has failed. China's semiconductor supply chain has never been stronger. The pace of Chinese tech innovation has accelerated instead of stalled. U.S. sanctioned firms such as Huawei, DeepSeek, BYD, DJI, BGI are winning the tech race against their competitors. Chinese innovations are broad-based beyond the daily headlines. Numerous scientific institutions such as Nature magazine, Lancet, ASPI, and Harvard Belfer Center are acknowledging China's lead in R&D for critical future technologies. In fact, China now boasts the most number of top research institutes and universities globally and is widening the gap with others. And here are links to my 2 recent articles on the subject. Did I mention that China can send astronauts to the space station and return them to Earth, unlike certain other quote superpower whose astronauts didn't know they bought one-way tickets? Western media reported with glee when President Xi ordered a crackdown on monopolistic big tech like Alibaba, Tencent, and Didi in 2019. Doomsayers solemnly pronounced China tech boom was dead in the water, and CCP was revisionist commies that would ruin Chinese economy to their obvious delight. Instead of derailing China's tech progress, The crackdown delivered its objective to break the inertia of monopolies, redirect resources, and release the raw entrepreneurial spirit of smaller businesses. As a result, we are now seeing the emergence of startups like DeepSeek, Unitree, Deep Robotics, and Game Science. China's lead in science and technology will only widen in the coming years as the country's graduates, 4 times STEM students as the US annually, roughly the same as the rest of the world combined. The average age of the teams behind DeepSeek and China's lunar mission is around 30. They are worlds apart from the stereotypical Western depiction of Chinese youth. The West is well advised to be afraid of the daring and entrepreneurship of China's next generation. On the military front, there is no chance the US can defeat China in a war near Chinese shores, whether in the Taiwan Straits or in the South China Sea. War games after war game by the US DoD in the last decade has shown the US will suffer a debilitating defeat against China. The only variables seem to be the speed of the defeat, the amount of casualty, and how many planes and ships will be lost. For those armchair warriors who claim U.S. superiority, I encourage you to enlist in the U.S. Navy or U.S. Air Force, West Pacific Theater, and we'll find out what is the probability you will return in a plastic bag.
Okay, actually,
We'll
uh,
find.
it's a body bag,
Yes,
a plastic body bag.
yes. I know it's horrific.
Yes.
Even the U.S. nuclear brinkmanship will not work after China has shown its ability to retaliate against continental U.S. with its test firing of the DF-31AG nuclear ICBM missile in September 2024, the second or third most powerful ICBM in its arsenal. And then here is my recent article on the prospect of China U.S. military showdown, and the link is here. Finally, the PSYOPs the U.S. regime has tried to turn the Chinese population against the Chinese state and the Communist Party, a central party of the hegemon's usual playbook, has completely backfired. The Chinese government is enjoying the highest popular endorsement in its history, with approval ratings over 90% compared with the pedestrian. Wait, you're moving too fast.
Oh, sorry. I got too enthused.
Oh, okay. Compared with the pedestrian 30 to 40% in Western democracies. Most Chinese youth are now looking at the U.S. as a belligerent, arrogant, bad faith, and declining opponent today instead of a benign inspirational power to identify and learn from a generation ago. For the average Chinese, you don't have to agree with CCP on everything to realize the US regime has no good intentions with the Chinese people and Chinese state. It's a life and death fight.
Okay, for those who don't know, CCP is the Communist Party of China.
The US system is not superior. When Trump called the US a failed state in his election campaign, few people inside or outside the country disagreed. The much touted, quote, beacon of democracy is nothing but an oligarchy window dressed as a democracy. With 13 billionaires in senior government positions, Trump leads a verifiable plutocracy bar none. It will take millions of words to discuss the state of affairs in the U.S., and much better informed authors have written volumes on the empire's polarization, inequality, dysfunction, and decline. I wouldn't spill too much ink here. While China's political and economic systems have many flaws, I challenge anyone to do an apple-to-apple comparison of the two systems on factual basis. Deng Xiaoping liked to say, quote, black cat or white cat, the cat that catches the mice is the good cat, which system is delivering for its population. Here is my short piece comparing China-US cooperation in an area most Westerners think the US is superior, no doubt, but really. And then he has the link there. China is not a historical interloper. China is the constant in the history of human civilization. It is the world's oldest continuing civilization for 5 millenniums. The Chinese state formed centuries before the Roman Empire and millenniums before the Westphalian concept of nation states appeared in the West. China led the world in science, technology, arts, and literature and was the largest economy for most of human history. China's rise is a return to normality as history normalizes after an aberration of 300 years of Western colonial domination. The U.S. came out of this aberration in human history, and it is the interloper, not China. The U.S. is not some, quote, chosen country, just like the Jews are not some, quote, chosen people. Your God is not our God. Your destiny is not our destiny. For those court scholars proclaiming, quote, end of history, what ends is merely their credibility. History will continue and all empires fall. White people are not superior. As with any race, there are smart and compassionate people, and there are stupid and malicious ones. Generalizing makes no sense. That said, white people don't have a don't have a higher than average IQ score, do better in schools, and they do not run faster or jump higher. Chinese students in the West, on average, perform better than the white students and work harder. Obama seems smarter than W. Black people jump higher and run faster in general. In Paris Olympics, a Chinese swam faster than everybody else. White colonialism, a specialty unique to the race, seems to indicate below average morality and ethics. Yeah. It is the world It is worthwhile to highlight again a point made by the neocon scholar Samuel Huntington. Quote, the West is not superior in values or ideas or religion, but rather in applying organized violence. Westerners often forget this fact. Non-Westerners never do. Confession must feel good. Even in organized violence, the West is losing its edge. Check out Ukraine. In summary, as China continues,
Sorry.
in summary, as China continues its economic and technological rise, the U.S. will simply be more scared. The causes of its fear will not lessen but proliferate. I really don't feel bad for the trolls. That was good.
It was a terrific article. It was full of facts. Uh, Also, great comparisons, making point after point, okay, in a very convincing way. What I was fascinated by in this one was all the links to more specific issues that he has treated already and that he put in. I think there are many valuable links for other things to read.
Right, and he was proving himself.
Subsidiary points here. Yes, he was he was proving his own points by researching some of the controversial points.
Right.
I think I'm going to read all this stuff. Looks like, it's worthwhile reading and covering.
Yes. It
Important.
gives you more insight, more information.
Yeah, very important things. This is the third article we've covered by him here.
Yes. Yeah, I recognize his name.
And the first two were very good also. In fact, I'm going to see how many of his articles are here. There may be, if you click on his name, you probably can, got to verify I'm human, but there it is. Yeah, there's a whole list of other articles by him here. We covered before, truth is on the sharp end of the bayonet. And the U.S. is reeking of the smell of fear. I think we might also have covered the watershed hypersonic technology breakthrough, China's new hypersonic air-to-air missile. I seem to remember covering that also.
Yes, that sounds familiar to me as well.
Yes. Anyway, a whole list of valuable articles here. So anyway, much more to open up here and learn about. This article, though, was very, very good, I think. So let's see if we have any more comments. We did get some more comments. Sherry said, good show, Joe and Dee. Have a good night. Well, thank you, Sherry. We're very glad you came. Even it says, interesting, didn't know 70% of Amazon's merchandise is Chinese. I didn't know that either. That's a good fact. So maybe all those with a beef against China can boycott Amazon, even if better reasons exist. Even I said, that said, I wonder if Trump's tariffs on China will significantly affect Amazon. Maybe they will. And of course, that would be to the detriment of consumers here.
Yeah.
Evelina said, the good article, D. So, and that was the last comment.
Thank you.
So I think we can now say goodnight. We've been at it for 3 hours and 17 minutes.
Well, it's good you got everything in.
It's good I got everything in, yeah. I have some interesting stuff for Thursday also, which is on completely different subject. So it's good
Okay.
that I got everything in tonight. I won't feel compelled to go into these. Okay, but thank you, Dee, for coming tonight.
Yes, thank you for having me.
It was a
It was a
pleasure.
good show. Yes, it was a good show. Moved along good and everything. Everything
Yeah, I
went
thought
good.
it did also, yeah. So anyway, have a very good night. And I know you're going with Madeline tomorrow night. I don't think I'll have another show till Thursday night.
Alrighty, so
Okay,
I will
and my
see you Thursday.
Thursday night it's my 8 o'clock show, and then you have your 9 o'clock show following that,
Yes.
or 9:15 show, I should say.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
And I was going to say, please hit the like button, subscribe, and share. And how about buying Joe a coffee?
Or going to my Patreon account at Patreon. I'm Joe_Firestone. Okay, remember you can play with Patreon, so even if you don't want to leave a monthly contribution, you can make a single contribution and then can opt out.
Yes.
Patreon works fine that way.
Yes, it's very good.
Okay, and remember, Dee has. Will you please tell them about your fundraising accounts also, D?
Yes, I have a Cash App and what is it? Cash App and Venmo and yeah, I think it's PayPal and everything goes with my name, Dolores Pierce.
Okay. So
And on that note, I
on
guess we're
that,
going to say good night and good night, Bonnie.
Good night.
I took the words out of your mouth.
okay, good night, D, and good night to you, Evelina.
Yes,
Thank
good
you
night,
for
Evelina.
coming and for sticking with us all the way.
Exactly.
That was really good.
Yes. Good
So
night.
good night.
It was really good.
Yeah, I thought it was really good also.